Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is your host, Nicholas Zard, and you're listening to the Lighter Side of Psychosis on the Tap the Source channel. Now, what is the lighter side of psychosis? Well, it's going to be a sort of a spoken story of our society, where we are, what we're experiencing, what we're doing. And although it's going to be mostly, I guess, based from what I'm observing, I'll be more than happy to include anything that you guys want to talk about, anything that you guys are experiencing, any of your stories or any of the things that you're just in the middle of. Because let's face it, life is really strange, right? I mean, how many times do you walk into a situation, you open up your mouth, and then all of a sudden you look around and people did not take it the way it was intended to be, or it was blown out of proportion, and all of a sudden you find yourself in the middle of the most Kafkaesque situation, unbeknownst to you, and certainly never meant to be that way. So this is really going to be about that. And I'll start with a story. I'll start with something I'm actually currently going through right now, which is making me laugh at this stage, although it wasn't always making me laugh. But before I do this, let me introduce myself a little bit more. My name is Nicholas Zart, and I've been a journalist for the past about 10 years now, and I've been covering the world of electric vehicles, which eventually led me to cover renewable energies. But the real thing that I've always been very interested about is, wow, this is an interesting tool. How does it affect us as a society? In other words, guys, isn't this amazing? Look at all the things that we can do, and especially look at the implications. So I was really more interested in that, the society trends and everything that is happening around transportation. And of course, back then, we were really talking about electric cars, right? Well, it slowly morphed into electric transportation. But today, we're talking about mobility. We're talking about electric mobility, which means much, much more than just producing a car and having people buy them. These days, you have Uber. These days, you have Lyft. These days, you have public transportation. We're seeing a renewal or a revamping of the system. And boy, in the U.S., we surely need it, right? But so we're seeing a heck of a lot of things happening. And as much as we see technological breakthroughs, especially in the West, one thing that is still pretty darn obvious is that people are really not that happy. I look around and I don't see a lot of fulfilled people. I don't see a lot of genuinely happy people in the West. And I'll give you two examples of that. The other day I was riding my bike going to work, and I have a beautiful scenic route, right? I ride on the beach, and there's a bike pathway and there's a pedestrian pathway. Of course, you always find one or two people who insist on walking on the bike pathway. So you tell them, I'm a nice person. I say, hey, please use the pedestrian pathway. And guess what the guy does? He flips me a middle finger. So I'm thinking, you know what? I wanted to get off the bike and just slapping a whole fist of mine, but I didn't, obviously. But it made me think again. People are not happy. This guy deliberately does something he's not supposed to do. He deliberately pisses off other people. But guess what? He does it because he has problems, right? I don't have problems. You can walk wherever you want, but at least be smart about it, right? And if you're not, well then, whatever. My problem is, don't make my life hard. Don't make my life any harder it is, because I don't make your life hard. At least I try not to. And if I do, tell me, say please, say sorry, whatever you need to say, and I'll move on. But most people don't react like that. And so this show is really going to be about mostly that, how we react as people, how this society really doesn't cater to our mental health. It tries to, it used to cater to our financial health, but these days that's a very strange point to make. So another story I will let you know is that a few years ago, my wife and I went to India. We wanted to visit India. And of course, you can't visit India. It would take more than a lifetime visiting every bits and parts of India. So we went for about 2.5 weeks, and we visited the southeast of the country, Tamil Nadu, as well as New Delhi and Varanasi, a very famous place where the Buddha gave his first talk, and a very, actually the city next to it. And Varanasi is a very special holy place on the Ganges where a lot of things happen. But here's our takeaway from India. Although India is embracing its introduction into the quote-unquote modern world, well, it still manages to, it balances out right now the way it lives, which is not I guess, up to gear with what we're doing here in the West, at least as far as the material wealth is concerned. But these people are happy, and they're much happier than we are. Not only they're much happier than we are, but they get to integrate spirituality and even religiousness into their everyday life. And I think this is obvious when you see the bindi that most people wear on their eyebrow, the little red dot, or they can have different colors. But also what I've noticed is that a lot of business owners will open up their shop in the beginning and pray to Ganesh. Ganesha is the remover of obstacles. Now, whether you believe in it or not is so unimportant, because placebos can work or not work. I happen to believe in it because, you know what, it makes sense to me and I've already proved it to myself. But that's my thing, right? So coming back to the West, we were bombarded with this, obvious materialism, but also this very, very dry and empty lip service that, you go out there, you work, you make money, and you're happy. Now, I'm 50 right now. I was born in 1965, and this is what I was taught, and I'm sure to this day, this is what we're still teaching our children, which is absolutely wrong, right? In the 80s, when I was finally working an active life, yes, it's true, you could go out there, you could work a lot, and you could make a lot of money, and I did that. In the 90s, things became a little bit more difficult, but in 2000, the decade of the 2000s, it was not like that. My income really crashed a lot. To make things worse, I decided for some odd reason to only want to do written journalism online in 2007, right before the 2008 crash, which meant that all of a sudden this whole thing about going out there, doing what you're passionate about, believing in, and then don't worry, you'll make money off of it. Yeah, no, it doesn't work anymore. And that's a really hard point to explain to baby boomers because they've never had that. They're still struggling along on what they were able to do before, and they're still holding on to it right now, which means a lot of people are not accessing this part of their lives. At this part of my life right now, I should be where they were 20 years ago, but I'm not. And it gets even worse for Millennium because, well, A, they don't care, B, they don't even know how to do it, and C, they're so disconnected with all of that that it makes communication an even tougher challenge. So in many ways, the lighter side of psychosis wants to address these things, and in a tongue-in-cheek kind of way. It is funny, ultimately. You walk into situations, and I'm sure this has happened to you. It has happened to me a lot of times in the past, and still to this day. But you say something, and then you look at people's faces, and you're like, well, that was supposed to be a joke. Why are you taking it like that? And then all of a sudden you realize you've created a monster, and you never wanted to. You never intended to hurt anybody's feelings. So, of course, you get paranoid. You start to think, I got to be careful. I can't say things. I got to be politically correct. And, of course, you start on that whole psychosis that we have these days where we have to be careful. And then you start to look around and you start to see that, you know what? Everybody's stressed out in the West. Everybody has a problem. And everybody, well, a lot of people are just not happy. Case in point, the guy who flips you off because you gently, nicely remind him that he's not on the right lane. So with that, with having said that, I've lived a very charmed life, to say the least. I'm somebody who, has been always very lucky. Whatever I touched turned to gold until about 2000, until about the late 90s when I came back from Japan. And I was in New York City with my fiancée at the time, my wife now. And I've noticed that I was working a heck of a lot, but I wasn't making that much money. And I didn't clue in on the fact that society had changed a heck of a lot. We were no longer the enterprising United States of America that we once were. And so one thing that I started to do is I started working with computers and building networks and things like that, which was all fine and dandy. But it definitely did not feed my soul. Plus, all I was doing is basically repairing Microsoft Windows mistakes, which I really didn't like to start with. And it didn't have that creative edge I was looking for. So then I did a few things. I actually even had a stint in real estate. I sold crystals. I even sold vacuum cleaners. And eventually I realized that, I'm a car guy. I love performance. I love efficiency. I love mobility. So one day I was at the Long Beach Grand Prix, and I was talking to someone about an electric vehicle. It was very unknown at the time. It was Tesla's very first Roadster, and that was in, I believe, 2007. And I looked at it and I was just could not comprehend why that would be a fun car to drive until, well, the person explained to me, an electric motor has 100% torque as soon as it spins. And all of a sudden, the performance part of me started to wake up, and the communication part of me also started to wake up, because I'm geared to communicate. I'm geared to, well, as you can hear, I talk a heck of a lot and I have a fast pace. But I'm also very interested in telling you and having you tell me what you are experiencing, what I'm experiencing, what I'm seeing, what works, what doesn't work. Hence, the idea behind this show. And the humorous part of it, at least for the lighter side of psychosis, is that we go out there with our problems. We go out there with our psychosis, and we just don't know how to A, resolve them, because B, we don't have enough time to do it, because C, we're chasing after always more money, always more material wealth, which doesn't leave us enough time to meditate, to sit back, to think, to understand what we are doing, what is happening, and what we truly deep down inside desire. So all of these really basically give you a society of people walking around with neurosis and psychosis, and we all interact with each other, and hence the fireworks. And sometimes those fireworks can be funny, but most of the time they're not that funny. So I'll start with a story, something that happened to me. I've always worked on my own. Okay, so I've always been an independent worker. I've been a consultant, and I could never understand when people used to tell me, or still tell me to this day. I understand it now. Okay, so I should rephrase this. When people used to tell me that it's so hard to work and it's so hard to work with people. People are really tough. I never understood that concept. I've never worked in an office. So for me, that whole idea was a very strange concept. I thought, well, I love working with people. I love getting to know people. I love understanding what they want, getting to the real what they need, and all of that good stuff. That's the part I really love. I love human interactions. They're fun. But what I never knew anything about is the daily repeating, the routine human interactions with the same people. Because I cherry-picked the people I used to work with, okay? So I cherry-picked all of my consultants. And of course I loved working with them, because guess what? We worked on our own. We weren't face-to-face all the time. I didn't have to see these guys 355 days of the year. And that was the difference. So after 2008, you all know what happened, the big crash, the big economic global downturn. And to be honest, it doesn't look like things have really changed that much. That yes, if you're one of those poor people who still listens to the news out there, please don't listen to the specialized journalists. I mean, these guys will tell you much more what's happening right now. Listen to Robert Schilling. He knows much more about economy than CNN does, or Business Insider, or any of these other mainstream journalists. And if you're into technology, same thing. Please don't watch the news. It's just abominable. And so I started writing, and I started just doing that, but it didn't really feed me, obviously. And at the time, for some reason, I was arrogant enough to think that all I needed to do was just write and everything will be all right. And I got invited to write for lots of different places, and it was fun. The Examiner asked me to write for them. I wrote for a little website called Torque News, and that was fun. That was also good. But it didn't really feed me. It didn't really I didn't really make the thousands of dollars I was hoping to get. And of course, I thought about writing a book, but that's a much tougher endeavor. And so I'm thinking today I should probably just say it instead of writing it. So about a year ago, as a well-known specialized journalist, and in my circle, I was one of the first 5 people to write about electric vehicles. I was well-known, and I have a good social media presence. I'm well-followed. I've worked with a lot of people. I've worked with a lot of professionals. I've interviewed a lot of CEOs, engineers, scientists, so on and so forth. So I wanted to capitalize that. So the obvious next thing to do is to do something with communications, do maybe something with PR, do something with marketing. And I'm approaching companies here and there, and I find this one company, and they're working on electric vehicles, and they do a really, really, really good job. Very low key, but enough money to do the right things, right? So we're talking, and then they say, hey, would you like to work with us? And I'm thinking, gosh, I would love to. I've been covering you guys for a long time. I love what you do. It's fantastic. Yeah, let's do that. And so I start to work for them. But at least I thought I made sure that, hey guys, I'm a communicator. I'm a people-to-people person. I'm a brand ambassador. In fact, I do experiential marketing right now. This is what I like the most. I take the product, the service, and I show other people how it works, how it's changed my life. That's the fun part. I happen to be a storyteller way before it was cool to be a storyteller, as in of this year. And that's how I thought I was very clear about all of that. And yes, there was sales involved, and I don't mind a little bit of sales. That's fun stuff, that's the icing on the cake. But as a salesperson, I'm not, and I will never be. And that's, I think, one of the things that is really wrong, I think, with a lot of companies these days is 97% of the companies I talk to out there, their reaction to how to survive, how to make more money, is to hire more salespeople. The concept is so flawed, it needs to be seriously revisited. If hiring more salespeople and having more salespeople would save the world, then we would all be doing that. And there's a problem with that. You need buyers. But as long as the buyers don't really buy and the economy is still doing not that well, and I'm sorry, I don't listen to Wall Street because Wall Street doesn't feed me, it's not going to work hiring more salespeople. What you need, though, is a coherent team. But anyway, here I am. I'm an office dynamic virgin. I have no idea how all of that stuff works. And so I thought I was very clear about I'm a communication person. Use me to write, use me to talk, use me to film, use me to go out there and represent you guys, but I'm not a salesperson. I'll do it, but that's not the gist. So I start my work and everything, and it's fine, and I don't have any experience working for an office, but I do it, and it's a lot of fun. And I don't see all the red flags. And all those red flags, you guys, if you're used to working in an office, you'll know it. You'll totally understand it. You'll laugh and you'll think, you didn't see that happening? You didn't see that coming? Well, no, I've never had that experience. The experience that you guys had in your 20s or your 30s when you started working, I've never had. I'm having it right now in my 50s, and let me tell you, it is an eye-opener and a head-scratcher. So one of the first red flags that I saw was there was a young, brash young man in his 20s. And like a lot of us were in our 20s, blah, 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 me, facade, persona, but, maybe not that much substance behind. And this guy actually was smart, was intelligent, he just wasn't fulfilled yet. He's just starting out on his life. So I just took it like that, and that was it. And one of the things that my wife and I do is we cook for ourselves, okay? We don't really eat a lot of processed food. We grow our own food as much as possible. She's vegan, I'm a vegetarian, and we're very careful about what we eat and how we eat and everything. So, of course, I bring my own food to work because I don't want to eat a hamburger or whatnot. I'll eat a pizza once in a while, but that's about it. And so he walks up to me and he sees what I'm eating, and he starts to laugh. And I'm not going to say the word he said. Just think of a female private genitalia part, and I'll use a word that sounds like it. And he goes, "Oh, that's wussy food." And I look at him and I'm thinking, what do you mean? Yeah, that's wussy food. It had tofu in it. And I wanted to laugh because I'm looking at this guy going, I wish I would have said it, but I didn't say it. I was like, because I didn't know him. And I wish I would have said, well, dude, I'm a heterosexual. I actually like wussy, and it's something that I like myself. I mean, if you have a problem with it, I don't think you should bring it out like that in the open, especially when you want to look tough and like a male and everything. And it's good, wussy food is good too, Anyway, so that was the first red flag I didn't see. I did brush him off. I made fun of him a little bit, but he just grumbled back and went back into his little cubicle, and that was it. And we didn't really have cubicles, but anyway, he went back to his desk. And so that was the very first red flag I just did not see. The second red flags were were interesting. They were much more subtle, and they became much less subtle as soon as I started looking into it. So we were in the front of the company, basically physically too, and in the back were the fantastic engineers who would actually work on the pieces that we were making, and these guys were, they had their own thing going, and you could see there was dynamics there too. And so every time I would walk in there, they would kind of look at me, the corner of their eyes, and smile. And I thought, there's something there. What's going on? So I befriended a few, and I started to learn a little bit more about the dynamics of the company. And as any company, you always have weird things happening. Now, I was personally brought up, and I've always thought that, my crap, I leave it at the door. When I step into someone's company, especially as a consultant, I leave my stuff, my personal hang-ups, at the door. It has no bearing on their reality. It's their money, it's their dream, it's their company. My personal stuff has no place in it, so I leave it at the door. But I also expect everybody else to do that. And this is something I never fully understood, is that actually, and you're all going to laugh at that, I discovered that people who work for companies bring their personal crap to the table every single day. And, of course, they all interact with each other, which makes for a cacophony of desires, motivations, and intentions. So I'm learning a little bit more about the oddities of the company, how the owner wants to do this way, well, and it should be done that way, and so on and so forth. Everybody has an opinion, right? And sometimes the opinions are valid, and sometimes, you know what? It's not your choice. It's just that's the owner's point of view. That's what he wants to do or she wants to do. They are putting the money into it. You're not. End of discussion. So, you just sort of suck it up and you go into that direction. And then there was something else. There was, as there always is, apparently, I didn't know about that one guy. That one guy who wants to assert himself or herself. And that person who is so assertive and so wants to be the numero uno, or in that case, the number 3, and was doing it in a very odd, awkward kind of way. And so that person, at first I didn't really care that much for that person because it was obvious that he was a very uptight young man who was trying to make his way through life and to, have his mark on life kind of thing. And you could see all the hang-ups. You could see the psychological problems. You could see even how he was raised. I had a pretty good idea that his parents were pretty tough on him, emotionally unavailable, and all of that good stuff, which basically gave birth to that kind of person. And so that person started to affirm himself. That person started to, send out little quips to me. And, I'm a nice guy. I don't care. Whatever problem you have, deal with it. It's yours, not mine. But after a while, when it's in your face all the time, you start to think, hang on a second, I can't really trust this person. And trust is something I learned a heck of a lot about. Now, in my ideal, naive, virgin world, I trust you, you trust me, we talk, and that's it. I don't think you're going to repeat everything or anything I'm going to say, certainly not out of context. I just didn't know people did that at work. How odd, right? So I'm telling him things, he's kind of telling me things, but then I'm hearing other things from other people that contradict what he's saying, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I have the psychological profile of this person. He's a hungry go-getter. He will walk on people. He will make fun of other people so that he is raised to a higher level of respect. So he's trying to command respect in the oddest and silliest way. You should never do it, through force, intimidation, and through cunning ways. Of course, that's not the way to do it, and everybody knows that. But when you're at work, that's how it works, right? And that was my third flag. I just did not notice. So at this stage, I'm all going in there and I'm all positive and cheering and everything, and I'm hoping to do more communication than sales, and I'm starting to understand the dynamics, and I'm a trusting person. I need to talk to people, so I have 2-3 people I kind of trust and I talk to, and all of a sudden I'm starting to hear things, and I'm starting to think, there is a leak in my theory on trusting people here, and I'm starting to hear things that I have said that were repeated in an off-context kind of way, and it sort of opened up my eyes. And that was the whole point of this show, The Lighter Side of Psychosis, is that we all walk into an office, even a group of people, even when we volunteer with our own psychosis, with our own neurosis. And that influences not only others around, but that influences the whole idea of why we're doing it, which obviously, in hindsight, when you look at it from a very far point of view, is absolutely stupid. There's no other words for it, right? So, having said this, I'm realizing that there are some very strange dynamics here. The person who's training me as a salesperson, which I thought was very odd, and I didn't clue in at the time, and he's also looking at me kind of weirdly, and all of a sudden I'm realizing it's been a month and a half, and guess what? I'm only doing sales. I'm doing a little bit of emailing here back and forth, but I'm really not doing that much. Worse yet, I'm still not trusted enough to handle the client relations. I still have to get it approved by that young man who wants to impose himself or the two owners. And of course, my hands are tied and I can't really do that much. So I'd rather be on the phone where I can actually talk and not really have to worry about what people think and all that good stuff. But, emails are emails. On top of it, there are problems with the company. There are products that are not shipping out. There are products that are not ready yet. And, well, unfortunately, people have already paid for it. So now you have to manage expectations, both on the company side and on the customer side. So all of a sudden, I'm turning out to be this salesperson who is managing expectations and doing none of the communication PR stuff that I love to do. And that is really wearing me out because I'm realizing this is a waste of time. You're not using me. You're not using my skill set to the best of my ability and your capacity, and it's really ridiculous. I mean, hire a salesperson. That's what you really need to do. Anyway, things get worse and worse and worse until a month and a half later, so 3 months all in all, I finally tell these guys, and I said, look, I don't foresee myself doing sales all the time. That's not the point. That's not why I joined on board. And they sound kind of surprised that I would say that. And I'm thinking, well, obviously, I mean, that's not who I am. That's not what I do. And that's just not at all what I should be doing. It's not a good use of my time. And so we agreed to go our different ways. And that was it. Okay, by now you're probably thinking, what is wrong with you, Nicholas? What the heck is wrong with you? A, you should have been holding on to that job. B, at least negotiate something with these guys. Try to see if there's anything else you can do with this guy. And you know what? I felt so ashamed, humiliated, that I never really contacted them back later to see if there's anything we could do together. So, of course, now I will do it. I'm a little bit more mature when it comes to working with companies and dynamics and all of that. I'm not putting on my consultant hat anymore, and I have a much better idea of what's going on. And this story sort of gives you an idea of what I want to talk about on the lighter side of psychosis. Again, that we all have our problems, very obviously, but we all forget to leave our problems behind us and go out there to do the things that we want to do. So I'm also a business and life coach, and I was trained very professionally, and I have an international accreditation. One of the things that we learn is most of the time when people say, I don't want to work there, I want to change careers, actually they don't. Most of the time, a great majority of the time, they really forgot why they chose to work in this field, why they chose to work with that company. They forgot that initial moment of magic. And this is where I think a lot of the problems could be nipped in the bud, is simply enough just by talking to people and having them realize what was that initial thing that I came out here to do. And all of a sudden, once you finally realize that, you realize that your personal problems that you bring to the table are no longer relevant. Because A, you're happy, you're doing what you want to do, you're aware of it, and you learn how to leave your crap at the door. Leave your crud at the door. Nobody wants it, and certainly I don't want it from other people. So that's the whole point of the lighter side of psychosis, is that we have a lot of strange stories, we interact with other people, we see a lot of very strange things out there. And the whole point is, well, what do we do with it? Now, one thing I would like to say, though, before I continue with this show is, this is not about me. This is not about how messed up life is. This is not about blaming life, society, and politicians, although I guess there's a lot of blame to be put on those politicians these days. But this is more about, hey, I attract that. Not only I attract that, but I react to that, which means I have a problem inside that is still not solved. Since I react to it, I must have some sort of responsibility in it. Yes, I didn't create it, but I do have my own responsibility. Well, there you go. That gives you a pretty good idea of the lighter side of psychosis. I hope you've enjoyed this. Check me out. My name is Nicolas Zart, Nicolas, at Car News Cafe. And send me suggestions. And in the meantime, we hope you've enjoyed this, and we'll talk to you very soon again.